Hello, friends. We all experience periods from time to time where we question the meaning of life. Especially the modern era has turned all our perspectives and emotions into a total mess. In this podcast, we will examine 9 different philosophical viewpoints from history to the present day that have been most widely accepted and well-founded. I hope you too can choose the paths that suit you best. First of all, absurdism, the philosophy of nonsense. Absurdism is born out of the relentless conflict between the unyielding desire to find meaning and order within human beings and the absolute and cold silence with which the universe responds to this desire. Albert Camus calls the collision of these two forces the absurd. Life has no predetermined cosmic meaning, and trying to search for it is futile. Psychological aspect. Initially, it creates a deep alienation and existential dread in the individual. However, accepting this absurdity, as Camus suggests, frees a person from being a slave to false hopes. Instead of committing suicide or blindly seeking refuge in a dogma, which Camus calls philosophical suicide, living by defying the absurdity is a psychological rebellion. The success stories, career ladders, or social norms imposed on individuals by societies lose their meaning when viewed through an absurdist lens. It gives rise to the awareness that social roles are actually nothing more than an illusion and a piece of theatre. Benefits. Psychological resilience. It provides a tremendous sense of freedom. If life has no ultimate script, the fear of failure also loses its importance. The individual lives life not according to social pressures, but as they wish, enjoying the moment and rebelling. Negative effects, the dark side. If it cannot be balanced, it can drag the individual into a deep depression, inaction, and a destructive form of nihilism by saying everything is meaningless anyway. It carries the risk of loss of motivation and chronic apathy. Insensitivity. Popular culture. The character Rick in the series, Rick and Morty, is a modern reflection of absurdism. He mocks everything in the face of the infinity and meaninglessness of the universe. Yet he continues to live anyway. The internet trends, memes, generated by today's youth, Gen Z, which push the boundaries of logic and consist of completely absurd and meaningless humor, are an absurdist collective rebellion and defense mechanism against the chaos of the world and the uncertainty of the future. Hedonism, Haskeluk. Hedonism argues that the sole purpose of life is to attain pleasure and avoid pain. However, philosophically, it is divided into 2. Cyrenaic hedonism, advocated by Aristippus, bodily, momentary, intense pleasures, and Epicureanism, advocated by Epicurus, mental peace, the absence of pain, long-term calm pleasures. Psychological and sociological dimensions. It is directly related to the reward mechanism and dopamine release in the human brain. While Epicurean psychology focuses on mental tranquility, ataraxia, momentary hedonism triggers a constant search for stimulation and dissatisfaction. It is the fuel of consumer societies. Capitalism pumps a Cyrenaic style of hedonism with the promise of "you will be happy if you buy." Societies are reshaped around instant gratification mechanisms, advantages and disadvantages, benefits, zest for life. When applied correctly, in the Epicurean sense, it keeps a person away from unnecessary ambitions, money, and the pressure of fame. It allows one to understand the value of simple things, like friendship, art, a good coffee, or a peaceful walk, and to get maximum enjoyment out of life. Negative effects. Hedonic adaptation. Its greatest danger is the hedonic treadmill trap. humans quickly get used to the pleasure they achieve and want more. This leads to addictions, chronic dissatisfaction, selfishness, and an inability to focus on long-term goals. Lack of willpower, consumer culture, the influencer lifestyle showcasing, "I craved it at 3 a.m., so I flew to Paris," treat yourself, or continuous luxury, consumption, and entertainment on platforms like TikTok and Instagram is the pinnacle of momentary hedonism. Modern Epicureanism, the zero waste, minimalism, and slow living movements that have risen in recent years are actually the contemporary counterparts of the rational hedonism. Living a quality life with few things away from pain, mentioned by Epicurus. Stoicism, founded by Zeno of Citium and reaching its peak with Marcus Aurelius and Seneca in the Roman Empire, Stoicism divides life into two categories: what we can control, our thoughts, beliefs, reactions, and what we cannot control, the behavior of others, the weather, the economy, death. The Stoic sage spends their energy only on what they can control. It is not about suppressing emotions, but passing them through a rational filter. It argues that it is not the events themselves that harm us, but our thoughts about those events. This approach is the foundational philosophy of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, one of the most effective schools of modern psychology. It increases social resilience during periods of crisis. Stoics believe in a unity of destiny, cosmopolitanism, world citizenship. Therefore, while seeking individual inner peace, they never abandon their social duties and sense of justice. For example, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, working for his people during the plague epidemic. Advantages and disadvantages. Benefits: unshakable inner peace. It provides tremendous emotional regulation and resilience, psychological robustness. It is the strongest shield against modern age diseases such as stress, anxiety, anger, and the inability to say no. It teaches one to take action instead of falling into a victim mentality in the face of difficulties. Negative effects: risk of misinterpretation. When overdone and misinterpreted, it can turn an individual into a feelingless, cold robot. Believing that they cannot change the outside world, a person may become passive against social injustices, falling into fatalism and the inaction created by radical acceptance. Business and entrepreneurship. World, Silicon Valley, CEOs, elite athletes, and professionals working under challenging conditions use Stoicism as a mental workout, for example, through Ryan Holiday's books. Stoic principles are applied to make decisions without panicking during moments of crisis. Every time you choose to remain calm, when you face cyberbullying on social media, or when someone cuts you off in traffic by saying, "This person's behavior is not under my control, but my reaction to it is under my control," it means you are living Stoicism. Existentialism, existentialism. Existentialism is based on Jean-Paul Sartre's famous principle that existence precedes essence. A table or a knife has a purpose, an essence, before it is produced. Humans, however, are first hurled into the world, exist, and then they create their own essence, who they are and their purpose, through their own decisions, actions, and responsibilities. Man is the sole architect of his own life. Psychological aspect. While giving the individual a tremendous power of authenticity, being yourself, it brings along a heavy existential anxiety. Sartre states, "Man is condemned to be free, because the responsibility of every choice belongs entirely to us. There is no destiny, genetics, or social excuse to take refuge in. It triggers individualism and a stance against social molds. By rejecting the ready-made templates offered to the individual by society, such as the ideal citizen, successful business person, or good family child. It enables the individual to defend their own unique identity against society. Benefits: being the leader of your own life. It removes the person from the victim mentality. The awareness that my life is the result of my choices gives rise to tremendous inner motivation, courage, and creativity. Because the person determines their own values, they lead a more fulfilling life. Negative effects: the burden of responsibility, the constant pressure to make the right decision, and the thought that if I make a mistake, I am the only one to blame, can lead to chronic decision paralysis, analysis paralysis, intense feelings of guilt, and panic disorders. Examples from today: career changes and carving one's own path. Today, people leaving traditional, guaranteed 9-to-5 jobs to turn towards completely uncertain fields that reflect their own passions. Content creation, freelance, digital nomadism, etc., is a prime existentialist example of the effort to create one's own essence. Popular culture. The movie Fight Club is an existentialist manifesto. Tyler Durden's words, "The things you own end up owning you. You're not your job, you're not how much money you have in the bank," are a call to demolish the artificial essences imposed by society and find true existence. Nihilism, Hitchhilik. Nihilism comes from the Latin word nihil, nothing, and argues that there are no objective moral values, truths, knowledge, and most importantly, no objective meaning of life. This movement, identified with Friedrich Nietzsche, is often confused with pessimism, but it actually states that humanity needs to rid itself of the illusions it has created: religion, ideology, absolute morality. Psychological and sociological dimensions. It produces two different psychological outcomes. The first is passive nihilism, which brings despair and depression. The second is active nihilism, praised by Nietzsche. The active nihilist does not see the meaninglessness of the universe as a destruction, but as an opportunity to break old shackles, and strives to become an overman, Übermensch, who creates their own values. It leads to the questioning of social institutions, laws, and sacred concepts. It accelerates the collapse of grand narratives: nationalism, universal peace myths, capitalist dreams. It carries the risk of societies falling into a moral void, anomie, during times of crisis. Advantages and disadvantages, benefits, radical honesty and lightness. It cleanses humans of false consolations, disappointments, and social guilt patterns. The thought that cosmically nothing matters instantly makes daily troubles, egos, and small obsessions insignificant, giving humans lightness and courage. Negative effects, moral collapse and apathy. At an extreme point, it can lead to moral relativism. Since nothing has meaning, then everything is permissible. The risk of dragging the individual completely into inaction, selfishness, destructiveness, feelings of worthlessness, and severe depressive processes is very high. Examples from today: optimistic nihilism. This concept, frequently covered by popular science and philosophy channels today, such as Kurzgesagt, is the thought that the universe doesn't care about us. One day the sun will disappear, and no one will remember us. Therefore, we must live the only chance we have in our hands, which is this life, by making each other happy and exploring. Cultural cynicism. In the face of economic injustices, wars, and climate crises in the world, the fact that the masses have completely stopped believing in politicians or saving ideas and view everything with the perspective that nothing will change is a sociological reflection of passive nihilism. Pragmatism, Philosophies. Pragmatism was developed by American thinkers such as Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. According to this philosophy, the abstract truth of an idea, theory, or belief is not important. What matters are its practical consequences, its functionality in life, and its cash value. If a thought makes your life easier, solves a problem, and works, it is true. Psychological and sociological dimensions. Psychological aspect. It distances a person from abstract delusions and endless why me questionings, shifting them into an action-oriented mindset. It takes the individual's focus away from past regrets or future abstract fears and centers it on the question, what is the most useful thing I can do right now with this situation in my hands? Sociological aspect. It ensures that institutions, educational systems, and state policies are flexible and solution-oriented. Instead of ideological dogmas, practical solutions that increase the welfare of society, such as scientific and technological progress, are supported. It is the foundation of the management and business style of the Anglo-Saxon world, especially the US. Benefits: high efficiency and problem solving. It provides a tremendous capacity for adaptation. It allows one to view failure not as a destruction, but as a piece of data indicating this method did not work, let's try a new one. It optimizes time management and prevents your energy from being consumed by abstract discussions. Negative effects: moral flexibility and shallowness. Its greatest danger is that it can slide into the understanding that the end justifies the means. Focusing only on short-term practical benefits can lead to sacrificing depth, artistic aesthetics, long-term principles, and moral values. It can make a person mechanical and opportunistic. Examples from today: personal development and life hacks culture. Productivity videos on YouTube, time management techniques, Pomodoro, etc., and financial freedom in 10 steps contents are entirely products of pragmatist philosophy. They are concerned not with the depth of knowledge, but with whether it is immediately applicable in life. Software and entrepreneurship world. The MVP, minimum viable product, logic in the startup ecosystem is pure pragmatism. The product is not expected to be perfect. It is launched immediately, tested to see if it works or not, and updated practically according to the feedback received. 7. Cynicism, kinisms, the foundations of which were laid by Antisthenes in ancient Greece and symbolized by Diogenes of Sinope, completely rejects the wealth, power, fame, property, and artificial titles imposed by society. According to cynics, happiness is achieved by stripping away the artificial rules brought by civilization and living in the simplest, most virtuous way in accordance with nature. Psychological aspect. It completely frees the individual from the need for external validation and the pressure of what will people say. A cynic mind eradicates the anxiety created by social statuses and material worries by gaining immunity. However, it can give rise to building a hard shell, distrust toward people, and a sense of social alienation. Sociological aspect. It is a radical protest against social hypocrisy, luxury, and institutional corruption. Diogenes telling Alexander the Great, "Stand out of my sunshine, I ask for no other favor," is a sociological rebellion that invalidates the status games of power and authority. Advantages and disadvantages, benefits, radical independence. It provides a tremendous mental and physical freedom. No one can threaten or buy a person who needs few things. By simplifying life, it reduces the consumption stress brought by the modern world to zero. Negative effects. Social maladjustment. This situation, which has also evolved into the word cynicism in its modern sense, can turn a person into an extremely sarcastic, misanthropic individual who looks for bad intentions in everything and completely turns their back on society. It makes it difficult to take part in common social projects. Examples from today anti-consumption and financial freedom movements. Today, those who leave high-paying corporate jobs and career ambitions to settle in a village in the Aegean, those who apply zero waste, living to extreme points, or radical minimalists who completely reject acquiring property are modern cynics. Popular culture. The character of Dr. Gregory House. In the series House MD or Russ Kohler in Season 1 of True Detective are cynic/cynicism figures who attack humanity's artificial politeness rules and social illusions with brutal truths. 8. Determinism, belirlenimchilik. Determinism argues that every event in the universe, including human decisions and moral choices, is predetermined within the framework of universal cause and effect, relationships, and laws of physics. According to this philosophy, if we knew the exact position of all particles in the universe right now and the laws of physics, Laplace's demon paradox, we could predict the future flawlessly, meaning absolute free will is an illusion. Psychological and sociological dimensions. Psychological aspect, it exerts a dual effect on the individual. On one hand, it alleviates the destructive feeling of guilt experienced for past mistakes, because it provides the awareness that it could not have been any other way anyway. On the other hand, it can create helplessness by giving the person the feeling that they have no control over their own life. Sociological aspect. It fundamentally changes the philosophy of law, crime, and punishment systems. Instead of punishing the criminal as born evil, it views the criminal act as an inevitable consequence, output, of genetic, upbringing, and socio-economic conditions, causes. It focuses not on punishing the crime, but on improving the causes behind it. Advantages and disadvantages, benefits. Analytical and objective view. It prevents personalizing events. Instead of panicking during a failure or crisis, it allows you to analyze the process coolly, like a scientist in a laboratory. It increases empathy in understanding the psychological and biological reasons behind human behavior. Negative effects, fatalism and willlessness. The thought of, since everything is predetermined, what is the point of my effort, can slide the individual into laziness, fatalism, and escaping moral responsibility. The fault is not mine. It's in my genes and my childhood. Neuroscience and artificial intelligence. Today, neuroscientists, for example, Sam Harris, examining the decision-making mechanisms in the brain and stating, free will is actually an illusion. The brain plays on us. Our decisions are made by neurons milliseconds before we even notice. Is determinism's search for scientific proof. Algorithms and big data, YouTube, Spotify, or Netflix, predicting with high accuracy what you will watch next or what you will buy by looking at your past data, causes, is a model of digital determinism. 9. Transcendentalism. Born in America in the 19th century, under the leadership of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, transcendentalism argues that society, religions, and organized institutions corrupt humans. It states that true reality, spiritual enlightenment, and freedom can only be reached by returning to nature, withdrawing into oneself, and trusting intuitions. It believes in the divine essence within the individual and the power of self-reliance. It strengthens the individual's inner compass. It replaces the mental noise created by modern life with the healing silence of nature. It psychologically supports the person to view solitude as a laboratory for inner growth and creativity, rather than fearing it. It stands against social conformism and blind obedience. The concept of civil disobedience, initiated by Thoreau by refusing to pay taxes against slavery and unjust wars, is the version of this philosophy turned into sociological and political action. It deeply influenced leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Benefits: inner enlightenment and originality. It grants a tremendous spiritual depth, creativity, and self-confidence to humans. It gives the courage to live independently from the system. By re-establishing the broken bond with nature, it gives rise to an ecological consciousness and a deep respect for life. Negative effects: detachment from reality. When lived at an extreme point, it can push the individual into a marginal seclusion that flees from social responsibilities and completely rejects the scientific and technological blessings brought by civilization. It can pave the way for excessive mysticism and distancing from rationality. Digital detox and retreat culture. Modern people turning off their phones to escape notifications and going to silence camps inside nature for days is a current application of the philosophy of life in the woods. Walden. Popular culture. Into the Wild. The movie Into the Wild, which tells the true life story of Christopher McCandless, is the purest modern manifesto of transcendentalism. The character leaves everything behind, flees from the corruption of society, and searches for his own essence and God in the wild nature of Alaska. From which window do you look at the world? Do you have ideas apart from these? Let's discuss in the comments. If you like the podcast, you can subscribe to my channel for this kind of content. See you in the next podcast. Goodbye.